Stop! Don't buy that performance SUV. If life is prying a performance sedan from your cold, dead hands, there's a better way. It's this, Audi's RS6, the ultimate family wagon, and as we might try and justify in this review, possibly the ultimate car. But what's the catch, and what has Audi changed for this model year? Let's find out.
Let's start with the bad news. The RS6, in all its muscular glory, is more expensive than ever before. Now wearing a before on-roads price tag of $241,500, it's hardly your average mum and dad family hauler. But then there's nothing average about the RS6 at all. It's the biggest, meanest wagon out there, and tweaks for the 2024 model year make it even more powerful and therefore even faster. In fact, it's one of the few normal-looking combustion cars out there that can still hold a candle to many of its electric rivals, with a big V8 helping it sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in an eyeball-flattening 3.4 seconds. We'll talk more on the performance specs later though, because if you're wondering how far your nearly $250,000 gets you on the standard spec, it's pretty much everything Audi offers. There are now lighter than before 22-inch alloy wheels, adaptive air suspension, a high-performance braking system, an RS-specific exhaust system, matrix LED headlights with adaptive high beams, a 10.1-inch multimedia touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity, as well as always online services, Nappa leather trim for the seats and across the dash and console, and one of the best instrument panels on the market. Ambient interior lighting also features this time around, as does a panoramic sunroof and a Bang & Olufsen audio system. The list goes on for a while. Actually, maybe skip to the full review over at carsguide.com.au for the rest of it. Rivals? Well, there aren't many direct ones. Mercedes offers its E63 at a comparable price point, but there's no wagon option. And the real competition is set to come from BMW when its next-gen M5 Touring lands, whenever that might be.
At a distance, this is just a station wagon, but the closer you get, the more apparent it becomes how mean the RS6 actually is. It's wide, it's chiseled, it's not just good looking, it's iconically Audi.
Its stance is so wide, its ride height is so low, and its wheels are so massive that any keen eye will be able to spot where the differences are between this and any other family wagon. Wagons aren't exactly trendy, but there's something undeniably cool about having the hauling capacity of an SUV at the ride height of a sedan. Of course, if you want to look even more svelte and you don't need the boot space, the RS7 is always lurking around at a very slight price premium. Inside, the RS6 has the modern amenities of the Audi range. Expect the usual sharp screens, lovely sports seats, and a tasteful application of textures throughout.
The way these screens integrate into the design of this dash is really lovely, and Audi were one of the first to get on this digital dash setup. It's the original, and honestly, it's still probably the best. It's really customizable, it looks great, and all these screens and computers are really fast too, and you've got that permanent screen down there for the climate controls, which is a nice touch. Now, in terms of style on this interior, you can go to town, sort of putting, this car in particular has those blue touches inside here, carbon finish, lots of nice leather touches, so you can sort of feel pretty comfy, even though, you know, this is a proper performance car. It's not a steer, it's not covered in hard materials and too much carbon. There's a nice tasteful application of chrome, gloss, you name it. Gloss is a little bit hard to keep clean, but hey, it looks good when it is. In terms of practicality, so I feel like I've got plenty of room in this front seat. It's a really nice wide cabin because this is a really nice wide car, but I was surprised to find there's a couple of catches. For example, this bottle holder in the door, it's not the biggest bottle holder I've ever seen. And these two bottle holders in the center here, they're also quite narrow. So if you've got quite a large bottle, it actually won't fit anywhere in the front of this cabin that I could find anyway. You do get a nice kind of center console box, but again, it's not deep, and a lot of it's taken up by the wireless charger as well, which is a bit of a shame. So it's still kind of smaller than you might expect in the front, given the footprint of the car, but the real benefit, well, that's in the back seat. Let's go take a look. All right, here behind my own seating position, and you can really feel where the footprint of this car has finally gone. I've got plenty of room for my knees behind my own seating position there. There's plenty of nice soft trims at the doors. The detailing continues as well. And it's nice and wide in here too, and you sink into these seats in a really lovely way. We even got a spin on the track before in these seats, and you really are held together when you're in the corners, which is kind of rare. What else can we note about this? Well, you've got pockets on the backs of the front seats. You've got some bottle holders in the doors, which are sort of okay. There's a separate sort of climate zone for the back here to go with these vents, which is really good. USB-C. And this center seat, while I don't think it's particularly great for an adult because you do have that huge raise to facilitate all-wheel drive, or at least the drive to the rear, it'll still be really useful for kids. So, you know, full marks back here, especially for a performance car.
Boot space comes in at 548 litres, expanding to 1,658 litres if you fold the second row flat. I must admit that there are technically upper mid-size performance SUVs you can get with bigger boot capacities, but it is still a much more usable space than you might get in a sedan.
The year is 2023 and there are still 8 cylinders under here. This engine produces 463 kilowatts and 850 newton meters, somehow an increase over what the RS6 had before. And with a little bit of mild hybrid assistance, it can even outsprint a lot of EVs on the market.
Drive is sent to all 4 wheels via an 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission, and there's a self-locking center diff to go with the performance brake package and that adaptive air suspension.
Okay, so at this point, I know what you're probably thinking. Yes, it's got all the spec, it's got a big boot, it looks pretty mean, but it's $250,000, and where does it really go? The answer is here on the track, and I really do think if you want to find out where all that money's going, the track's the only way to truly find out. And that sound. Audi have actually removed some of the sound deadening from the previous model so you can hear the engine more. And what a way to give a V8 engine a swan song than make it sound even better. This thing is an absolute weapon in terms of its beautifully tuned steering. That suspension is amazing, the way it leans in and lets you feel the balance of the car, and that all-wheel drive system just works its little heart out when you're all loaded up in the corners. Now, we've driven this car around this track at pace. We've been driven in this car around this track at pace by people who really know what they're doing, and I can tell you that there's probably very few other wagons that have ever existed that can do what this wagon does. Yes, that massive V8 engine is going extinct, and probably for a pretty good reason, but to really enjoy it in a car like this is pretty special. That gearbox is so silky smooth as well. It just snaps through the gears and the engine responds in kind. There is a tiny itty bitty little bit of turbo lag, but it's nothing that you won't get used to. And those brakes are absolute monsters. They just hold the car up like, wow. It'll slide too, we found that out. So, you know, it's not as though you can't have fun even with an all-wheel drive system like this. It really roars up near that limit, and it's even better in that back seat, so I'm sure, you know, your kids will love it on the hot lap. But as well, I've got to say, it's so wide and that suspension's so good, and the way that this car feels, it lets you have so much control on the track. It's kind of got your back. There's a lot of room for error in what you're doing. And that means you can have a great track day in something that looks like this, which is so, so rare. So sure, that's where your nearly $250,000 has gone. You can take your child seat out of the back, you can take it to the track, you can have a hell of a ride time, and then you can go home and drive it again just as you did before, hopefully if you haven't completely destroyed the tires. It's not like a lot of performance cars, yes, more affordable performance cars, but it's not like cars that you sort of cringe at the stiff suspension, because it does have air suspension. It's really compliant around town. Yes, it does reach its limit occasionally. After all, it's got such enormous wheels on it. But at the end of the day, you know, for a car that can go this fast around a track and then be comfortable around town, again, very impressive. It's quiet, it's sophisticated in this cabin, and you've got all the tech just a single press away. There are a handful of things which are a little fiddly, like it is very sort of touch-based in terms of the interfaces in here. You get a separate touch unit for the climate panel, which is permanent. That's really nice to have because you're not having to flick through menus just to change something on the air conditioning, especially while you're trying to concentrate on the road. So it is a best case scenario for this, but it is still touch-based. And even though it's got that haptic feedback, it still doesn't beat having a dial. One area where you might a little bit miss having an SUV is the ground clearance. While this car is still high enough to, surmount most objects, if you've got a particularly steep driveway or, your local shops has a particularly gnarly speed bump or something, there is a chance that, you could damage some of the beautiful little flares on this car and stuff. So yes, I haven't been super critical of the RS6, but this is a rare case of being really able to tell where every cent of your money has gone, both when it's at the track and driving around town. It's so rare, it's an endangered species. What a beautiful machine.
There is a problem though. For pretty similar money, you can get into the RS e-tron GT. And having driven these two cars back to back, I can tell you that the electric e-tron is better in pretty much every way. This might sound controversial, but it's not until you have the laser focus and raw speed of the e-tron that you realize that a twin-turbo V8 is comparatively overcomplicated and even distracting when it comes to the task of setting lap times. It bodes well for the future of Audi, but I have to admit, it took the shine off the RS6 a little. The RS6 has a big 72-litre fuel tank, which you'll need because its official combined fuel consumption is pretty high at 11.8 litres to 100 kilometres. You really don't want to know what this car was getting here on the track, but on my road drive I landed on a figure of 15 litres to 100 kilometres. Pretty eye-watering because you'll also be needing to fill it with top-shelf 98 unleaded petrol. The RS6 gets pretty much the full array of safety gear that Audi offers. For the comprehensive list, check out our written review over at carsguide.com.au, but you can expect a high-grade auto emergency braking suite alongside lane keep and blind spot systems, and of course, adaptive cruise with traffic assist. There's also a healthy array of airbags, although the RS6 isn't covered by the maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating, which is worn by the rest of the Audi A6 range. Audi offers a 5-year and unlimited kilometre warranty with 5 years of roadside assist, and a 5-year service plan can also be bundled in at the time of purchase. It costs $4,360, which isn't economy car cheap, but then with such a complex drivetrain and in the context of this car's list price, it seems pretty reasonable.
Okay, so what do you think? Have I convinced you? Are you going to buy one of these instead of that fast SUV you had your eye on? Please tell me you are, because to me at least, this is the ultimate form factor for a fast car. And keep in mind as well, this might be one of your last chances to get a V8 engine in something that looks like this. Tell us what you think in the comments below, and remember to check out our full written review of both this car and our news and other reviews over at carsguide.com.au.